Okay. Hello, everyone. So my presentation will be about all the benefits of veganism. Chances are pretty high that there are some benefits that even if you're already vegan for a long time that you didn't were aware of. So the overview, this you already know. There are three areas: health benefits, environmental benefits, and animal benefits for the animals. I won't tell you that much about the benefits for the animals because that's pretty obvious. So most part of my presentation will be about health and environmental benefits. So let's look at the health benefits. I'm sorry about the text editing, it didn't work with Linux. So there are three areas when it comes to health. First, there is consumer health. So people who eat meat, the omnivores, and they reduce their consumption of animal products, what benefits for their health will they experience? Then there is the benefits for the producer. So people producing the foods, the factory farmers, the livestock farmers, the slaughterhouse workers, the fishermen. And then there is the benefits for the general public. The general public, including us. So if other people outside there are reducing their consumption of animal products, we are benefiting. Or in other words, if they continue eating animal products, they might harm us even if we are no part of the system. I will explain you how this works. It's like with smoking. Smoking is bad for the ones who smoke. But also there is this indirect or passive smoking that you cause harm to someone else, to the non-smokers. What I will do first with the health benefits for the consumer health, I'll give an overview of starting from the most important health benefits for the consumer with the strongest evidence, and then in descending order, the smaller benefits with weaker or inconclusive evidence. The evidence is based on science, of course, so I'm fond of the scientific methods. I hate pseudoscience. I realize that there are a lot of pseudoscientific health claims, diet claims. So I want to be as unbiased and objective as possible. So for the first two areas, consumer health and so on, and environment, just imagine that animals are not sentient beings, that you're not influenced by that you don't have wishful thinking like how it would be nice if veganism would be good for your health as well. So don't think that, just assume that animals do not have rights, that those kinds of thoughts do not influence your judgment about how healthy it is. Yeah? Those judgments should not influence you. So let's start with the benefits. How many advantages are there? If you're interested in the studies, you can Google on the health benefits of vegan diets, and then you will see my website with a long list of more than 100 studies. So I will not bore you with the studies. They are as credible as possible as I could think of. So large prospective cohort studies, there are meta-analyses, there are some randomized controlled trials. I looked at it from a skeptical point of view. So where do we start? With number one, this you should know, benefits in terms of cardiovascular diseases. So vegans, we have lower risk for cardiovascular diseases. I will not give you the percentages now, I'll give you them later. Cardiovascular disease, first of all, we think about coronary artery disease, so the clogging of the arteries. It's called atherosclerosis. Secondly, stroke. So in the brains, you might already know these things, high blood pressure and obesity. So these are cardiovascular disease-related things. Secondly, this you probably also know, cancer. There are a lot of studies, large prospective cohort studies, that says that vegans have lower risks of getting cancer, especially for the women. Some studies say that vegan women have 30% lower risk of getting a female cancer compared to omnivore women. What types of cancer? Starting with the strongest evidence, stomach cancer. Am I in your way? Bladder cancer, lymphatic and hematopoietic cancer, so with the production of your blood cells. Ovarian cancer for the women, breast cancer, and prostate cancer. These are types of cancer with rather strong evidence that vegans have benefits, lower risks. Oral cancer, that's less conclusive evidence. It's rather weak evidence. Pancreatic cancer, contradictory evidence. So I added a question mark when there is some weak evidence or inconclusive or contradictory evidence. Yeah. So these things might turn out to be wrong, I don't know. But for the moment, there are some studies that say that vegans have low risk of colorectal cancer, lung cancer, liver cancer, and that's about it. So probably 11 types of cancer. Yeah, vegans have low risk for those 11 types of cancer. And third, we have type 2 diabetes. Probably I'll also know about this, that vegans have low risk of diabetes, so roughly 50% low risk. So these are the three most important ones, the ones that you should remember: cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. Strong evidence, big health impact now. The most loss of healthy life years here in the West is due to these diseases. So that means that if we can reduce the risk, we gain a lot of healthy life years. But there's more than those three. So I will explain you now about the other health advantages. There are cognitive disorders. Alzheimer's disease, I would say some evidence, rather conclusive perhaps, that vegans have low risk of Alzheimer's disease. This one is obvious, the variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, or the mad cow disease. This is obvious because it's related to the prions in the animal tissue, and it's only if you eat animal meat that you get those prions. So only the meat eaters have those problems. Dementia, it's not that conclusive evidence, I guess, but some studies say that vegans have low risk of dementia, low risk of Parkinson, also with a question mark, and depression and mood swings, also with a question mark. Some studies say that vegans have low risk of mood swings. So, next, bacterial infections. Strong evidence that foodborne illnesses, that vegans have low risk of getting foodborne illnesses due to dangerous bacteria. I will explain later what types of bacteria. Lung disease. There seems to be rather strong evidence that vegans also have better lungs in terms of low risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, low risk of pneumonia. So that's about lungs. We will move on. We are at 7 now, still moving on. Renal failure. Strong evidence that vegans have low risk of renal failure. Let's see how far we can get. We're already at 8. Now the upcoming benefits are less conclusive. So question marks. Vegans might have a low risk of liver disease. That's number 8. Number 10, vegans might have a low risk of multiple sclerosis. Might have a low risk of arthritis. Might have a low risk of bacterial vaginosis. You're still with me? We're at 11. Perhaps you didn't know about cataract. They might have a low risk of cataract. We're at 13. Gallstones. It's very boring, this presentation. 14. Diverticulitis. You're still with me? Osteoporosis, I added 2 question marks. This is very contradictory, inconclusive evidence. Some studies say that vegans might have a low risk of osteoporosis. Tooth decay, very, very weak evidence. And finally, allergies. Very, very weak link. Some studies, again. So probably 17 health benefits or categories of diseases. 17. Did you expect it, 17? I didn't expect it when I studied all the literature. But again, remember, the first 3 are the most important ones: cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. The rest you can perhaps forget, and you know, the allergies, it's not conclusive. Now, if you add those all up, I would say, with all the things, the studies that I've seen, roughly speaking, vegans have a 15% low risk of a chronic disease and premature death. The graph would look like this: the health impact, the total health impact of everything you do, flying around, traveling, eating, smoking, whatever. If you look here, this vertical bar is our average omnivorous European diet. Yeah? And you can see it's the health impact is a flat J-shaped curve. That means if you're an average omnivore and you reduce your animal consumption, your consumption of animal products with a little bit, you already get quite a lot of benefits. Yeah? That's the steeper part on the right in the graph. Yeah? Now, if you further reduce it, you will see that the graph becomes flat. And that means we are not sure what the really healthiest diet, the Mediterranean diet perhaps, contains some animal products. So if you're really vegan or close to vegan, it's roughly the same, I would say, about your health. It doesn't matter that much. And you also see there's a rather large gray error bar there. That's the uncertainty. So that means when it comes to health, it's a very tricky science. And the benefits are not always that clear. So the uncertainty might be is large. Yeah? So that's why I added the fat gray area there. But you can see the difference between the peak here, our average consumption, and the vegan who does not consume any animal products. That difference, I expect it's about 15%. Yeah. So now, as I explained about the benefits, now what are the causes? Well, 2 things. There are bad things in animal products, and there are good things in plant-based products. The bad products are, first of all, the saturated fats. Rather strong evidence, very reliable meta-analysis about intake of saturated fats and cardiovascular diseases, for example. And saturated fats are mostly in animal products. But there's more. We start to think that the saturated fats in the meat cannot explain everything, why there are so many health benefits when you reduce your meat consumption, especially cardiovascular diseases. There is some weak evidence now, but it's gaining traction, that there is a kind of protein, an animal protein, L-carnitine, in red meat. And if you consume a lot of it, then the cholesterol in your blood will increase. And then you get the cardiovascular diseases. So perhaps that's the other component of the cardiovascular diseases that's especially in red meat. Because we see there is a difference between the red meat and for example, poultry meat. There are toxics in meat and in eggs, cancerous toxics, heterocyclic amines, polycyclic, whatever aromatic things, nitrosamines, dioxins, toxics. Especially also in fish, there are toxics. There are the heavy metals and persistent organic pollutants. So that's one of the reasons why fish is not that healthy, but I will explain more about it later. And there are excessive nutrients in meat. So, for example, about the mood swings, there is arachidonic acid. It's essential for us, but if you consume too much of it, it might give some kind of inflammation in your brain and result in mood swings. The same with heme iron. So we know iron is important for us. Heme iron is the iron that's absorbed for our blood cells, quickly absorbed. But now there is this question, why is especially red meat so cancerous? Perhaps it's simply due to the fact that in red meat there is more heme iron. So some people start to think that heme iron might be cancerous. There are the bacteria, Escherichia coli, Salmonella, Cryptosporidium, Listeria, Campylobacter. All these kind of bacteria that are mostly in the animal foods. If they are on your vegetables, your cucumber or so, that's the reason is that they use animal manure to fertilize for the vegetables to grow. So it's again the animals that make the vegans ill. If the exception is if you eat veganic, so from organic vegan farming, so farming that does not use animal manure, then you will have no risk of those salmonella on your vegetables. Viruses, for example, the bovine leukemia virus might cause cancer. And then there are the good things in the fruits and vegetables. First of all, the antioxidants that protect against cancer. And secondly, dietary fibers in whole foods, in whole grains and fruits and vegetables. And when it comes to, for example, breast cancer, there is this issue, why are the Asian women, why do they have so low risk of breast cancer? Some hypothesis is that it's due to the isoflavones in soy, some chemicals that protect against breast cancer. If I would rank the products, I would say the worst thing to eat are the processed meats. And now, by the end of this year, the World Health Organization, I think they will decide whether processed meat will be categorized as likely healthy, likely cancerous, or probably cancerous. We'll see what they come up with, but they will decide how cancerous processed meat is. So there is quite some evidence that it might cause cancer. The orange, that's the red meat. Then neutral, I would say, to eat are chicken meat, dairy, and eggs. So purely from a scientific point of view, we used to believe that eggs are bad due to the high cholesterol levels, but large meta-analysis recently that says that there is no effect of higher risk of cardiovascular diseases when you eat a lot of eggs. So I say keep up with science and accept the results of this meta-analysis. The same with dairy. There's a large studies. When you consume more than 2 or more glasses of milk a day, then it becomes detrimental for your health. It's bad for your health. But 1 glass of milk a day, it's neutral, I guess. There are good things in milk, bad things in milk. On average, it's neutral. With fish, I would say it's slightly positive. The omega-3 fatty acids in fish are positive. The toxics are bad. If you look at the large prospective cohort studies, often the most healthy groups are the fish eaters. So, except for some fish species and for pregnant women, I would say that most fish is, on average, beneficial for your health. But there's something even better, and that is the nuts and seaweed, also containing a lot of omega-3 fatty acids and not containing the toxics. So in the dark green, I put fruits, nuts, vegetables, and seaweeds. So they are more healthy than fish. So if you switch from fish to seaweed and nuts, small health benefits might happen. So that's how I would rank them. Although I'm against fishing, I have to accept that fish might be beneficial. In terms of chronic diseases, let's look at the cholesterol saturated fat index. Actually, that's an old index. It's not very good anymore, but roughly speaking, it causes chronic diseases. Per kilogram of product that you consume, you see in the red are the animal products, and the animal products have the high levels of saturated fats. So that's clear. Here, the foodborne infections, if you want to end up in hospital, these are the hospitalizations per kilogram of product. So if you consume 1 kilogram of chicken meat, the large red bar, then you have 1.2 to the power -5 probability of ending up in hospital due to a foodborne illness. So the most dangerous things to eat in terms of foodborne illnesses are chicken meat and eggs. Okay, that's the consumer part. That's only the consumer part. Let's see about time, okay. Now about the producer. So there is a difference between a livestock farmer and someone in horticulture with planting fruits and vegetables. 30% of the Dutch and Belgian pig farmers have lung problems, and 40% of them are infected with MRSA bacteria. That's the multi-resistant type of bacteria that's often found in hospitals, for example. Multi-resistant against the antibiotics. So when you're a pig farmer and you're ill and you go to hospital, it's becoming tricky because the bacteria in your blood are resistant against a lot of antibiotics, and you might infect other people. So this MRSA, it's for the pig farmers themselves, it's not that bad, but for the children and older people and weaker people, it might be very bad. The most dangerous job on Earth is the fisherman. 129 deaths per 100,000 workers per year. On number 2 is, I don't know if you have an idea. I'm sorry? No, lumberjack. And then on number 3 are the livestock farmers. That's the third most dangerous job, 40 deaths per 100,000 livestock farmers. Looking at the industry sector, then on average, slaughterhouse workers are 3 times more risky than other industries, car factory and so. So 3 times higher risk of life-threatening injuries, and they are always doing the same movement with their knives, so they get kind of pain in their hands, tendinitis and carpal tunnel syndrome. Especially for the slaughterhouse workers, there is also an emotional stress. It's called, technically speaking, perpetration-induced traumatic stress. It's a type of post-traumatic stress disorder that you can develop. It's if you're a soldier in war and you shoot someone, you might develop this kind of post-traumatic stress. You get the nightmares, the concentration is gone, you're irritated. And a lot of slaughterhouse workers, they develop this problem. So you see, if you compare this with horticulture, for example, there are healthier ways to farm than livestock and slaughterhouse. So that's about the producers. Now let's look at the public health. This is about us. So they are eating meat and we are getting the flu. Yeah, and sometimes we might die because first of all, there is the risk of the zoonotic diseases. The worst of all was the Spanish flu, killed 50 million people after the First World War, more than 50 million people. It's not clear where the origin of the flu occurred. Best evidence might be pig farmers in France. There was the origin, but most likely pig farmers, because some people believe it's pig farms in Arkansas, in the US, and then the US troops, they brought it to Europe. The Mexican swine flu, that's obvious, that's from swine, and before that it was with the poultry industry in the US. Killed 300,000 people, so that's the recent pandemic that we had. Bird flu killed 400 people. Then there is the SARS virus in Asia, killed 800 people. Nipah virus outbreak killed 200 people. Streptococcus suis killed 100 people. And then in the Netherlands, we had the Q fever, killed 25 people in 2011. And these are people, you know, on a sunny day, you go with your bike on the countryside and you breathe in some dust of the factory farm over there. And then you get Q fever and then you die. What? Yeah, but I only mentioned here the ones that are clearly generated in factory farms and things like that. Ebola is also, and there are a lot of other zoonotic diseases due to consumption of primate meat. But these are only about the conditions in factory farms. Well, not even factory farms, but farms, livestock farms. So 70% of the emerging human diseases come from animals. That's the World Health Organization says that. But here animals, it's broadly speaking, including mosquitoes and so on. So it doesn't mean that all these 70% diseases come from the pigs and the chickens. But the flus, they most likely come from the pigs and the chickens. What else do we have? The antibiotic-resistant bacteria, I already mentioned them. MRSA, ESBL, and Salmonella are already multi-resistant bacteria. Then there is air pollution due to ammonia and particulate matter. There is water pollution due to nitrates. Toxic algae blooms. So on the coast of France, for example, where if you breathe the air, the algae are toxic. You breathe in the air and your lungs are irritated. And why are there these algae blooms? I will explain later. It's due to livestock, of course. And then malnutrition. So the second biggest food waste is turning 30% of the grain harvest into inedible manure. So 30%, that's quite a lot of food waste. 80% of livestock feed is suitable for people, and also the fertile land that we use, the productivity of this land, on 80% or so, you can grow things that are suitable for humans. The excrements of the cows. That's about health, okay? Now let's do the same about the environmental benefits. We still have some time, yep. Environment. Let's look at first the mammals on land by weight. So those inner circle here, that's the body weight of all the humans on Earth. This gray area here, it's the body weight of all the cattle. Then there are the pigs, the goats, and the sheep. So in body weight, there are more livestock, mammals, than there are humans. And then the small parts are the elephants and the wild animals. So if you take one human on Earth, one human has on Earth the equivalent of 2 chickens, 1 pig, and part of a cow. So for each one of us, there are 2 chickens somewhere and 1 pig somewhere. So again, how many advantages are there for the environment? Let's look at them. This you should know, otherwise you were living on Mars. Climate change, one of the most important causes. Livestock farming contributes roughly 15% of the global greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. Second, deforestation, that you also know about. Deforestation also of mangrove forests for the shrimp aquaculture, so deforestation. And third, there is eutrophication or over-fertilization. I will explain later the process, how this works, this eutrophication. But these are the top 3. The strongest evidence, like with the health benefits, we had cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. Here we have the top 3, climate change, land deforestation, so land use, and Eutrophication. These are the three most important environmental risks of consumption of animal products. But there's more. You might have thought about this, overgrazing, and that results in soil erosion. Acidification of land due to the high levels of manure that you use on land. Then there is overfishing. So obviously, if you consume fish, you contribute to overfishing, but also, I'll explain later, the pigs, they consume a lot of fish meal, so also the factory farms, livestock farming, contribute to overfishing. Pesticide pollution for the livestock feed. Salinization through irrigation, so for all the feed crops, you need water, and then the soil becomes salinated, so with a lot of salts. Depletion of groundwater. Acidification of oceans, that has to do with the CO2 emissions. When they are absorbed by the oceans, then it results in acidification and the coral reefs die. Depletion of fossil fuels, which means that for 1 kilogram of animal products, you need more fossil fuels, more oil and so on, than for the production of 1 kilogram of vegetables or soy. Pollution by veterinary medicines. This is obviously only used in livestock farms. Use of monocultures and feed herbicide resistance. So most crops in monoculture are for animal feed, and they are herbicide resistant, and then there are weeds that develop this. Also this resistance to herbicides. Then there is particulate matter. Here you see it in the farms, but also on the countryside, there are often levels of particulate matter higher than in the city. In the city, it's due to the traffic and so on. On the countryside, it's due to the livestock farms. Stratospheric ozone depletion, so livestock farming might contribute to the depletion of stratospheric ozone. Again, I've ranked these in decreasing order because stratospheric ozone depletion is now not a very serious problem anymore. So it's number 15. Shall we move on with number 16? Building all those fences is not good for wildlife animals that cannot easily migrate. So a fragmentation of ecosystems for the large wild animals is not good. And then there's often use of invasive grass species that you use for grazing. And these grass species, they are exotic species, so to speak, and they outcompete other herbs and so on, and so you get eventually a monoculture, biodiversity decreases. So again, we end up with 17 environmental benefits. So who would have thought that by reducing your consumption of animal products, in one stroke you have 17 or so health benefits and 17 or something like that environmental benefits, and benefits for public health, and benefits for producers. Again, as with the health impact, I would say, if you look at the total environmental impact, the ecological footprint, for example, of an average European person, an omnivore compared with the same average person who is a vegan, the vegan has a 15% lower environmental impact. Okay, so becoming vegan reduces your environmental impact with 15%, all else equal, so if you keep using your car and things like that. Now again, one type of animal product or one type of agriculture is not the same as the others. In terms of biodiversity, for example, there are some types of livestock farming that are beneficial for biodiversity. It's called high nature valued grassland grazing. It has a positive effect on biodiversity. So in natural parks, grazing and then eating those cows. But you see, these are the number of cows in the world. Only 10% or so are grazing in this high nature value grassland. Then there is some types of livestock farming that can be neutral in terms of environmental impact, and that's mostly when the pigs and the chickens eat our food waste, the things that we do not we cannot eat. Yeah? So the byproducts that we do of our food that we do not eat, we give it to the pigs and chickens, and then we eat their meat. For the environment, it's neutral. Those byproducts could also have had some other benefits. We could use them for energy production, for example, as biomass. So these byproducts, you can create added value of these byproducts by turning it into meat, or by turning it into electricity, or in green manure, so to keep the soils fertile. But then if you see, most of the livestock agriculture is harmful for the environment. That's the upper right things, when you use crops, especially in the regions of deforestation. So what that means is, again, as with the health benefits, we have a flat J-shaped curve. Here on the right, we have our current average European omnivore consumer. If he decreases his consumption of animal products a little bit, he already gains a lot of environmental benefits. So that's the steep part over there. And then close to the vegan with zero consumption of animal products, you can argue about the environmental impact when you use a little bit of meat 1 day a week or 2 days a week. It's roughly neutral, it's the same. You also see that there is a small gray bar, smaller than with the health studies. So that means that the evidence for environmental benefits is stronger than the evidence for health benefits. So a small uncertainty area there. So when you consume, if you're completely vegan or you consume a little bit of animal products, it's roughly the same for the environment, I would say. This is a very nice graph. I don't know if you can see it. What we as consumers buy and use, this left bar, it's what we as consumers buy in terms of mass, kilograms. Yeah? So most of the mass that we can touch, so to speak, is the minerals, the concretes, the stones for the buildings. That's most of the mass that we consume for the buildings and so on. So that's this lower yellow bar. Then there are the metals, the blue, red are the crops. So let's say 15% of the mass that we consume is crops and vegetables and fruits and so on that we consume. And then, interestingly, there is this 4%, the brown part, 4% of the mass that we consume are animal products, the milk, cheese, dairy, and eggs. And then the upper bars are the fossil fuels and the plastics. Yeah? So in terms of kilograms, everything we consume in end products, 4% is animal products. Now, if you look at those products in terms of the global warming potential, we see here the brown part, that's this 15 to 20% of the greenhouse gases are due to this consumption of animal products. Okay. Then in the third graph, we see the brown, big, the 70 or 80%, that's the land use. So even if in terms of mass, we only consume 4% of all the kilograms that we use, 4% is animal products. But for those 4%, it corresponds with 80% of the land use. Yeah. Then there is human toxicity. In terms of human toxicity, animal products are not that bad. But this is the most important thing, the right column. That if you kind of average out all the environmental benefits, so it's the environmentally weighted material consumption, adding all these environmental harms together. And then we see there are two problems that we have. We consume, first of all, this upper 1/3, that's too much consumption of fossil fuels. So 1/3 of the problem is fossil fuels, including plastics and so on. And then the brown part, 1/3 of the problem, of the environmental problem, is animal products. Yeah. So these are the two big problems. And then the rest, that's our crop, our tofu also has some environmental impact, of course, but it's much smaller. So 1/3 of the total environmental problem is due to the consumption of animal products. So what we have is, it's very inefficient. We need a lot of fertile land and fossil fuels, water, pesticide, animal feed, and veterinary medical products. And we end up with a lot of bad things: nitrates, manure, greenhouse gases, acidifying gases. So that's not efficient. I will skip these parts because I think I'm already behind schedule. Very briefly, these are the planetary boundaries, looking at the most important global environmental impacts. So it's a very interesting study if you Google planetary boundaries. Let's briefly look at them. First, climate change. So this inner circle, that's the safe operating space, so to speak, the safe area. If you move beyond it, for example, with emission of greenhouse gases, we move beyond the safe planetary boundary. Yeah. That's why we have this global warming problem. I've added a percentage, 15%. So 15% of this trespassing of the boundary is due to animal products. Then there are the novel entities, the chemicals, the plastics, and so on. We do not know what the boundary is. We do not know how much animal products contribute to it. Stratospheric ozone depletion, you see that's within the boundary. So that's not an acute issue now. It's not a serious threat, the ozone depletion. But 10% of this ozone depletion now is probably, it's a very, very rough estimate that I made, roughly due to livestock farming. And then there is atmospheric aerosol loading, so the particulate matter. We do not know what the planetary boundary is. We do know that livestock farming strongly contributes to this aerosol loading. Then there is ocean acidification. That's the lower part here. So in terms of ocean acidification, we're very close to the planetary boundary. So the oceans are acidifying due to emission of CO2. A lot of the CO2 comes from deforestation, burning the tropical rainforest, for example, for livestock agriculture. So that means livestock agriculture means deforestation, means CO2 emissions. CO2 is absorbed by the oceans, and that results into ocean acidification. 15% of the ocean acidification is due to livestock. Biogeochemical flows, that's strong in red, so even more red than climate change. So there is very importantly, and I will show you here about the nitrogen footprint. The emission of reactive nitrogens. So in the atmosphere here, there is passive nitrogen gas that we breathe in. But there is reactive nitrogen, ammonia, ammonium nitrate, and dinitrogen monoxide. And that results in a disturbance of the nitrogen cycle, results in acidification, over-fertilization. Even it contributes to climate change, some nitrogen gases. So I spoke before about eutrophication. This disturbance of the nitrogen cycle results in eutrophication. What that means is coastal dead zones in the sea, where the fish die due to oxygen depletion. And how that works, Yeah, it's a disturbance of the nitrogen cycle if you have an aquarium, but you don't have it, I'm sure. But if you have an aquarium, you know the risk of over-fertilization, algae blooms in your aquarium. There are ocean dead zones, 10 times the area of Belgium, 400 dead zones located in the world. How does this work? Well, this animal manure, excessive manure and fertilizer, it's used on land, but it flows into the river and then into the sea. Then in the sea, it results in excessive algae blooms. Now, if the algae, if they die, then they are decomposed by bacteria. Those bacteria, they consume a lot of oxygen when they decompose all the dead algae. And that means that the oxygen drops. So using fertilizers and animal manure on land results in fish who can no longer breathe. So here you see how much nitrogen is used on land. The red areas is where there's a lot of nitrogen going on, used on land. And these are also the areas where there's a lot of intensive animal agriculture. And these are the coastal dead zones. You see the North Sea in the Gulf of Mexico in Asia. So these are close to the places where on land there's a lot of livestock farming. Yeah, I can show you the nitrogen footprint per kilogram of product. Again, the red products are the animal products. So if you consume 1 kilogram of chicken meat, you have a high nitrogen footprint, which means a lot of nitrogen entering the ecosystem, entering the sea. I want to show you this one. Very impressive. One of my favorites. I'm not going to explain what it means, but this is the global nitrogen cycle. I don't know if you can read it, but if you look at agriculture, it's very important. Let's say, my question is a worldwide vegan organic agriculture possible? Organic means no artificial or synthetic fertilizers, so no nitrogen fertilizers. A vegan farming means no animal manure. Is it possible to keep the cropland fertile? Not using the grazing land, not using the fish from the sea. Yeah. Can we feed all the people? And feeding the people means, well, in the future, 9 billion people, can we get enough protein? Here is the real question, do we, as vegans worldwide, in a vegan world, do we get enough protein? And why protein? Because protein is, nitrogen is the essential atom in proteins. Yeah? So nitrogen is very important to keep the soils fertile and for the production of protein. So if we don't eat the protein from the fish, and if we don't eat the protein from the milk, from the grazing cows, from the grazing lands where nothing else can grow except grass, if we don't use manure and synthetic fertilizers, is it possible to feed the world, the human world? Looking at this graph, I would say probably yes. But I'm not going to explain why, but you can see, like, if you delete this arrow and then there is livestock, if you pull away the livestock, there is the fish catch there, take that away, and then you see how much nitrogen we humans need for our proteins. I would say our soya, so the nitrogen fixation by the crops, the soy, for example, the beans, that will help us to get enough proteins. So this is one of the first evidence that I can show you that it might be possible worldwide, vegan organic agriculture feeding 9 or 10 billion people. I will move on with fresh water. This is the water footprint, but you already know that. Animal products have higher water footprints. Importantly, land system change, that's one of the top 3 impacts. Deforestation, I'll skip this. If you look at how much agricultural land you need per kilogram of product, then we know what to eat. Of course, fish, they don't require land, so that's why it's 0. Interestingly here, if you compare the area for 1 kilogram of cow milk, or 1 liter, with 1 liter of soy milk, so the cow, first of all, needs a lot of grassland. For soy, we don't need this grassland. This can be natural habitats. We don't need to use it. But then for the cow milk, we need soy, corn, and cereals. And the area for the soy, corn, and cereals, this area is larger than the area that we need for our soy milk. So if we switch from cow milk to soy milk, the cropland area decreases a little bit, and the grassland area can be turned into natural habitat. We don't need to use it anymore. Another interesting study to show that it might be possible for a worldwide vegan diet. In terms of land area, if you add up in the future the reference scenario, that's a Dutch study looking at the worldwide area that you need for the dark green, that's cropland, the brighter green, that's grassland. So most of the area that we use is grassland, low fertile grassland where only grass can grow. Now, if you turn to the vegan diet, that's this one here, the geen dierproducten diet, you see that the brown area, the cropland area, in the future, in 2050, when we are all vegan, the cropland area will be, roughly speaking, as much as the cropland area that the omnivores use. So no increasing deforestation. And then this grassland area, again, that's natural habitat. Now we don't need to use it anymore. So we have a lot of more natural parks, so to speak. So again, this is the evidence that even with the current area of cropland, it might be possible to feed the world in a vegan way. And then there is the impact in biodiversity. So the Food Agriculture Organization says that probably the strongest threat to biodiversity is livestock farming. If we switch to a vegan diet, roughly our impact on biodiversity will decrease with 1/3 or 30%. So that's if you compare these. Yeah, I will not explain the details. About overfishing, I will skip this because it's already. If you're interested in this kind of, I can send you the PowerPoint perhaps, but this is how much fish that we catch from inland oceans, illegal captures, and bycatch. The bycatch goes again to the sea. Roughly speaking, more than 100 million tons that we catch per year of fish. Half of it goes directly to human consumption. The other goes mostly to aquaculture, that again eventually goes to human consumption. And you see that roughly 15% of the fish capture goes to livestock. So in terms of fish meal, so livestock farming contributes 15% of the overfishing problem. Yeah, this is about the populations that are overfished, at the brink of being overfished and not yet overfished. The green one, 1/10 of the fish populations is within safe limits of overfishing. You have the collapse of the fish stocks in 2050. To conclude the environmental impact here, this is an Italian study. This looks at the average Italian diet, the total environmental impact. The upper part is the depletion of resources. This part, the brown part, is the decrease of biodiversity, so the ecosystem quality. And then this part is the environmental impact of human health. So, of course, if you damage the environment, that has an impact in terms of human health. And on the far right, you see here the vegan organic diet. If you compare it, the impact of the vegan organic diet, it's 5 to 10 times smaller environmental impact than an average Italian diet. This is again a similar study, a Dutch study. On the horizontal axis is the sustainability score. On the far left, we have the average Dutch diet. On the far right there, we have the vegan diet. So this proves that the vegan diet is the most sustainable. Vertical is the health score for the consumer. And there you see also that vegan diet, together with the pesco-vegetarian, so the fish eater, and the Mediterranean diet are the most healthful. Yeah. So vegan diets are in the top class of the most healthy diets, and they are the top of the most sustainable diets. Let me briefly say something if I have some time left. Are you hungry, or can I, because we started too late? It's nice to explain this next part, but some of you might already know it. It's this one, livestock explained in human terms. Some of you might already know what's coming. So what I did is, we know we use our livestock animals. They are very seriously disabled, bodily disabled. So we bred them to become highly productive. So if you look at the pigs, pigs are slaughtered, 6 months with a weight of, more than 100 kilograms compared to a wild pig in nature. If you translate it into human terms, it means a toddler of 2.5 years of age with a body weight of 70 kilograms being slaughtered. Can you imagine bodybuilder boy? The sows, artificial impregnation and so on. So the sows, they get 15 piglets 2 or 3 times a year. That means, in human terms, imagine 1,000 women in a maternity unit each year giving birth to triplets, to 3 babies. Yeah. So you can imagine that this is very exhaustive for the women and the children. That in this health clinic, there will a lot of women will die, a lot of babies will die. So our Bite Back undercover investigation, that reminds me, if you, I don't know if you've heard about it this morning. So 2 years ago, we released some footage, undercover investigation of pig farms. According to the sector, nothing terrible happened, but we saw a lot of pigs in the films, a lot of piglets dying and a lot of problems with the sows. And this is the reason why we see all these health problems with those pigs. And now those 9 pig farmers, they sued Bite Back with, on the average, we risk a total cost of 70,000 euros. So we don't know what the future of Bite Back will be when we have to pay 70,000 euros. So if you want to support Bite Back, all financial help is welcome. Broiler chicken, a baby of 1.5 years of age with a body weight of 30 kilogram and pectoral muscles of 6 kilogram. So those babies, they cannot walk up straight, they fall. And yeah, that's what happens with the broiler chicken. Laying hen, for the women amongst us. Women who menstruate every day and lose twice as much menstrual fluid. You can imagine it as a woman. So because the ancestor of the chicken laid only 12 eggs per year, and now almost every day a year, an egg now weighs 60 grams. The ancestor egg was 30 grams, so twice as much. And an unfertile egg, it's like menstrual fluid. That's biology. The dairy cow, that's like a woman producing 7 liters of milk per day in lactating period, 7 times more than a normal woman. So the dairy cow that we see in the grass here in Belgium and the Netherlands, they have a real problem with their udder producing way too much milk. And a beef cow, a child of 6 years of age with a body weight of 50 kilogram. To conclude, if I would, there are some studies about the animal welfare impact per kilogram of product if you eat it. If you want to reduce animal welfare, the animal suffering, or the other graph, number of animals killed, the most important thing to reduce is aquatic products, so fish and shrimp. Shrimp has a lot of bycatch, a lot of these are the number of vertebrate animals that are killed in the production of 1 kilogram of, say, cheese or soy or whatever. So most of the animals are killed per kilogram of product in bottom trawling for shrimps, fish catch, and then there are the chicken meat and eggs. In terms of animal suffering, you also see the top ones are fish, aquatic products, and chicken products. So the best, if you gradually want to reduce animal suffering, starting from an omnivore, the first things you can reduce is aquatic products and chicken products. This here also includes the number of animals that are killed on cropland for the production of our tofu, but that's negligible. But also interesting, you see actually for 1 kilogram of milk or so, it's not that much animal suffering or animal death as compared to 1 kilogram of fish or chicken meat. So that's where I can conclude. So if you want more details and if you want to look at the long list of more than 100 studies of the health benefits, you can look at my website. Any questions?
Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for your talk, first of all. I have one point I want to make. I believe it's very, very dangerous to suggest that fish might be healthy for you. Part of the reason, so the data I am familiar with is that fish is probably, especially farmed salmon, is probably the most poisonous food we have, and yeah, and just basing it on a population that eats more fish and not. I mean, I don't know what study you were talking about, but just the consumption of fish is probably not increasing their health. That's what I believe. So, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at large prospective cohort studies, and you look at for example, the famous Adventist health studies where the vegans are very healthful, the fish eaters are a little bit more healthy, have a little bit lower risk of getting chronic diseases and early death. But it's true that it depends on the fish species, and there are some studies that for several types of fish species, there is the discussion, the mercury in the fish compared to, that's bad for your brains, and the omega-3 fatty acids, that's good for brains, for child development. And for some fish species, the mercury is worse than the omega-3 is good. So some fish species are in red or bad. But on average, I would say, yeah, how do we explain that in the large prospective cohort studies, the people who eat fish often have the lowest rates of chronic diseases.
Do the study exclude the other lifestyle changes of the pescatarians?
Most of them do,
okay.
yeah. So smoking and so on, and then, but it's also relative because, as I said, the vegans can even do better if they eat more seaweed and nuts. Then they have the good omega-3s and not the bad. So in that one ranking with the colors that I showed, you can say that only the top, the fruit, nuts, vegetables, seaweeds, are the good ones, and the rest are bad. But it's relative. what I showed you is this compared to an average omnivore diet. If you now, as an average omnivore diet, you increase your meat consumption with 1 kilogram, or you increase your fish consumption with 1 kilogram, and what happens? So.
Thank you for digging through all those studies. I think this was a lot of work. One question about eggs. You said they are not as bad as I have thought, but you said you also showed that they contain a lot of cholesterol. So could you elaborate why aren't eggs so dangerous to your cardiovascular system as most people think?
Well, this meta-analysis shows that eggs are actually neutral for cardiovascular disease, although they contain a lot of cholesterol. So I showed you the graph of the cholesterol fatty acids index with the red bars and the green bars. But I said also that's a bit misleading. It's a bit an old index because now there's more like the idea that cholesterol in your food contributes to cholesterol in your blood, that's highly contested now these days. With saturated fats, that saturated fats contributes to a lot of cholesterol in your blood. I can give you a good meta-analysis of the Cochrane collaboration, that's high-profile meta-analysis, that says that, yeah, there is a correlation between saturated fats and cholesterol. And so, yeah, then there was this meta-analysis with eggs, and it said that the egg eaters did not have higher risks of cardiovascular diseases compared to those who eat almost no eggs. It's not, I don't know if they can really explain it. Perhaps that there are things in eggs that are protective against cardiovascular diseases. Perhaps that the cholesterol in the eggs is not absorbed and then does not contribute to cholesterol in your blood. I'm not sure, but for me, as I said in the beginning, we as animal rights vegans, we have to be aware about the fish, also this issue, and the eggs. I wanted to look at the studies from a really unbiased point of view. Like, I don't care if fish are sentient beings or not, when I want to know if they are healthy or not. So no wishful thinking, like it would be nice if the fish are bad because they are suffering. So I try to look at the data as objectively as possible, as I was not an animal rights activist. And what I do, general rules, is what are the big studies, especially the meta-analysis, saying, and accept those findings. But even then, some meta-analyses are criticized, and then it's evolving, and then there are counter studies again, and counter studies again. And so I can tell you about what I can definitely say you about the health benefits. For example, there are quite sure about it. Some things that I said are not correct. That's science. So I add a lot of question marks also because some of the claims that I made might not be correct after all. Like for example, with the eggs, we believe that the cholesterol in the eggs, okay, bad, but now there is this meta-analysis, and my rule was accept the meta-analysis unless it is a really bad, biased meta-analysis sponsored by the eggs producers. So, okay.
I had a question about the comparison between, in some studies, between omnivores and vegans. Does those studies also say what the diet of the vegans are? Are they raw vegan? Are they eat whole food plant-based diet? Or do they eat a lot of junk food? I can imagine that would make a whole lot of difference depending on what they eat for plant
It
food.
makes a lot of difference, and unfortunately, no. Fortunately, the vegans have a separate bar in the graph, so they are separately studied. That's nice. But the raw vegans, they don't have a separate bar in the graph. So we don't know statistics about a raw vegan diet or
I don't mean
other
that raw
vegan.
food is especially the best or something, but more that there are many differences between
That-
what you
indeed,
eat on a plant-based diet.
There are differences. What we know is with this Adventist health study, the vegans show to be really healthy. But in this Adventist community in the US, they already are quite informed about how to eat healthy. It cannot even that diet can be better, because even the vegans in this community, they eat a lot of sugar, for example, or don't eat enough nuts and seaweeds, for example. So
Supplementation of
within a vegan diet, there are also large differences, and it's quite obvious that, for example, some of us ethical vegans might have a unhealthier diet than healthy Mediterranean diet, including a little bit of cheese or so. So that because we eat too many cupcakes.
So yeah, I guess it would be interesting to do a research where, from what I've known, for what is known now, that a whole food plant-based diet, low in fat, high in carbohydrates, and then as unprocessed as possible, that would be the most healthy way. I know many doctors in America, they prescribe that to their patients to reverse chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes and that kind of stuff. So I can imagine, for example, with the egg study, that if they use that kind of group of vegans and then they make a comparison between cholesterol and your risk of heart disease, then that the outcome and the conclusion of the study would be kind of different.
And with the eggs, one thing to mention is also those people with diabetes, I guess, when they consume eggs, they have a higher risk of, I don't know what, heart disease or so. So for some groups, eggs are bad for people who have diabetes, and then vegans have a lower risk of getting diabetes. So, so it is not all black and white. It depends on what else your conditions that you have for the eggs. But if you don't have diabetes, then eggs are, I would say, neutral, and vegetables and fruits and so on are positive. So if you switch from eggs to more vegetables, that can get a health benefit, because you delete something that's neutral and you add something that's healthy with more fibers and more antioxidants and so on. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's very complicated because we eat so many different things, and some eat more mushrooms than others, and some eat more seaweed than others, and therefore it's very difficult to say what's the most healthy diet. Now the thing is, with whole food vegan diets, we also have some explanations why this is one of the healthiest diets. With whole foods, we know it's the fibers. With vegans, and we know it's avoiding saturated fats and some animal proteins and toxics. So we know some mechanisms to explain why it might be better. But yeah, even amongst the vegetables, some are more dangerous than others. So it's difficult to say.
First of all, thank you for everything you did. And here. I would like to add a little bit of light here. I am from Spain. I'm a nutritionist, and I have a lot of patients who come to me with vegans with a lot of diseases like normally meat eaters. And each year, I think that we have more processed vegan foods available on the market. And I think we have to be really clever about them, because we all know if we eat a lot of vegetables and fruits naturally raw, it's better for us instead of eating like processed vegan food with salt, added sugars, refined foods. And I think we should, as advocates in animal rights, try to be as healthy as possible, because, for example, I am an example of it. I was really, not fat, but I was really overweight. And now that I'm really more healthier, each time, like when I give the message with NGOs I work in Spain, the message is more powerful, because if you are like really overweight or you look really sick and you tell someone, you have to go vegan, it's healthier for you. And you are 10 times healthier than the one that is receiving the message. So I think like a little bit of, we have to think about this and try to eat a lot of whole raw foods in our diets, even though we have each year, each time, more foods.
Yeah, I'd like to add something perhaps controversial for amongst you. We can say that a healthy vegan diet, so a vegan who is vegan due to health reasons, has a more animal-friendly diet than a lot of us ethical vegans. Yeah? And the reason is our cupcakes, for example. In our cupcakes, we use grains and sugar, and for the production of those crops, some animals die. Mice, hedgehogs, plowing on the fields and so on. So the healthy vegan diet, they eat more unprocessed foods, fruits and nuts and so on. And with fruit, for example, and nuts, fewer animals die than for the production. So if you eat 1 kilogram of fruit, or you eat 1 kilogram of cupcakes, for this 1 kilogram of cupcakes, which is unhealthy, the sugars and there are oils in it, soy oil and then palm oil and then whatever oils, it's a high ecological footprint. Deforestation, we already eat too much oils. The oil in nuts is much better than the processed oil in our cupcakes. So in our cupcakes are the sugars and oils that we don't need anymore. We have too much of it, and it's not healthy for us, and it's not good for the animals. So when I realized this, I tried to limit my consumption of cupcakes and biscuits and the things that we saw yesterday. And but it is controversial. And if you really care about the animals, also about the animals who die on the cornfields for the corn syrup thing, for the soy fields for the soy oil, the sugar beets, these are most often intensive agricultural operations with big tractors and plowing and so on. And we know a lot of animals die on the fields. A lot, some mice and some hedgehogs and moles and things like that. And then there is the deforestation part. So the squirrels are not happy when we deforest. So perhaps I can convince some of you to decrease the consumption of the unhealthy vegan foods and eat more fruit.
No, and also the last thing I will add to this, what you said, that if you are not healthy, someday you're gonna start to take drugs that are tested on animals. You're gonna use a lot of hospital places that really people that are really sick need them, and also you're gonna worry your family or people around you that take care of you because you didn't know how to care yourself.
Yeah, if we consume too much sugars, then we also get probably cardiovascular disease, and then we need a new heart bypass thing, and there are animal experiments for those food surgeons, and reduce your consumption of the unhealthy vegan foods.
Any more questions? No? Okay, thank you for your talk.